raise my hand to let them know that they're coming to the end of their time. And with no further ado, I think we should probably get started. I've not been given an order in advance, so I'm just going to go on the basis of the order of my screen, and that means that Dominic is up first to give his opening statement.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So, my goal is to challenge the party to speak more plainly about the difficult times ahead and to demand emergency action at Holyrood and in wider society in response to the collapse of climate and nature. The Greens have the luxury of two co-leaders, and this can be turned to our advantage. With a colleague focused on delivery in Holyrood, I can work directly with the public, with civic society, and with our excellent councillors to help accelerate and scale up the change we so urgently need. We have a problem with hope. Everyone craves it and voters demand it, but hope has also become a cynical rallying cry for vested interests and the super rich to conceal the immediacy and scale of their global catastrophe, to delay corrective action and retain control, selling imaginary future solutions. This is in fact hopium. If the Greens, as scientific and social realists, cannot call out this disaster, then who will? What's our purpose beyond modest green wins if we aren't the one political voice always demanding a credible response? Tragically, the future is not full of hope. 2 degrees of heating is expected by 2040, with 4 degrees probable before 2100, and scientists warn we'll soon cross multiple tipping points that endanger continued life on Earth. The suffering ahead is beyond comprehension. Food and water will fail. Billions of humans and other species risk becoming stranded in unlivable conditions. As Greens, we're rightly proud of our achievements in both local and national government, but the brutal truth is that the situation demands bigger and faster change. Rather than selling hope, we should be issuing a call to arms. Let's mobilize civic society to mount a grassroots emergency response and to empower a bolder politics. We must strive for the best, prepare for the worst, and protect what we love.
Thank you, Dominic. I have Gillian next. Gillian, you've got 2 minutes.
Thanks, Laura. I'm going to try and not need waved at, but inevitably it will happen at some point this evening, I'm sure. Hi, everyone. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Gillian Mackay. I'm the party's Central Scotland MSP and currently our health spokesperson. I've decided to stand because I think it's time for a new generation of leadership within the Greens. I've been Young Greens co-convener at for 3 years back in the day now. It feels like a long time now that I'm nearly the grand old age of 34. I've been branch co-convener as well for one of the smallest branches that we have in Falkirk and know how much support that those branches need, but haven't necessarily had it over the last few years as well to be able to develop them. I want to take the party's appeal to those communities out with our major cities. Our major cities we know are a source of our greatest electoral success and our biggest branches. But those industrial and post-industrial communities across the Central Belt and more widely in rural areas as well need that voice and actually are a massive untapped demographic for us at the moment. But we need to speak plainly to those communities, and having grown up in Grangemouth, I think I'm one of the people that can absolutely do that. We also need to adapt to that generation that Ross and I were part of that came into the party as in our 20s or for some folk in their teens, but are now having families. We need to adapt to that. We need to grow with those young people that came on board in the aftermath of the referendum and look to what they need from us now, as well as looking at climate and all those other things that are core to Greens as a whole. Broaden our horizons, broaden our voter base, and return the biggest number of MSPs we've ever had in 2026, as well as looking to returning our biggest ever council number of council candidates in 2027. So yes, hopefully cover more of what I was going to say later on, but thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Gillian. And I've got Ross next.
Thanks very much, Laura, and evening, everybody. I'm asking for your first vote for co-leader because I want us to bring hope back to Scottish politics. I think the sense of hope that this country could be a better place to live was strong a decade ago after the referendum, but it's faded pretty fast. And the Scottish Greens can bring that back. We do believe in a politics of hope, and we can do it by being brave and bold in how we campaign. People are really angry right now. Life is far too difficult, far too expensive for most people just to get by. And we shouldn't dismiss that anger, but we need to be the ones to say it's not the fault of refugees or trans people. It's billionaires, tax avoiders, greedy landlords, big polluters. These are the people who are at fault, and we will make them pay. We'll make them pay and we'll deliver the help that people and our planet really need. I want us to focus on ideas that deliver climate and social justice, like universal free bus travel. I've got a track record of delivery as a community organiser, a campaigner, and as an MSP. I've repeatedly raised taxes on the rich. I've cancelled the school meal debts of families who were really struggling. I've mobilised the working class community of Bal to protect Loch Lomond from the greed of Flamingoland, and then I turned that into a nationwide campaign. To deliver on our vision, I think the party needs to adapt and be more effective. I want us to empower volunteers and branches, make it easier to get out and campaign. To be honest, that means fewer meetings where we just talk to each other and more focus in those meetings on reaching outcomes that we can all get behind and move forward together. And to have a clear political strategy. It hasn't felt like the party's pulling in the same direction over the last year. And if elected, I'll propose a new political strategy to council. It's for all of us together to agree a strategy for this party, but I think it's for the co-leaders to make that proposal. So I'll propose one to deliver what I've just said. I joined this party in 2009. There were more people at my high school than there were members at that point. I'm so proud of what we've achieved, but I think we need to do more. We need to take on the super rich and big polluters. We need to make them pay for the policies that will tackle the climate crisis and make people's lives better. That's why I'm asking for your support to become co-leader.
Thank you, Ross. And last but not least, we've got Lorna.
Thank you so much, Laura. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming along tonight, giving up your Friday night for this. I'm very privileged to be part of an excellent gender-balanced panel for co-leader, and I'm excited and slightly terrified to be here. Internal hustings are always the toughest, so I embraced for robust questions from members. Transparency and accountability are, of course, core Green values. So I am really glad to get the chance to answer your questions, however tough they may be, so that you can decide whether you want me to continue to represent you as one of the key spokespeople and public-facing representatives of the Scottish Green Party. The Scottish Green Party is structured as a team, not a hierarchy, with a whole host of elected leadership positions, including council co-cos, executive co-chairs, committee co-cos, and loads more. The co-leaders are part of that team, and the success of the party has been down to all these people and the staff and all of our volunteers. Anyone who took minutes, organized a canvassing session, stood as a candidate, wrote a press release, donated some money. In the 6 years since I was first elected to this post, the party has significantly increased its impact in Scottish politics. We've got more MSPs, more councillors, we've knocked on more doors, we've had our first foray into being a party of government. We've gone from being a small party with big impact to being a major player in Scottish politics. And that success has been a team effort. And I've been so proud to represent you while the party's been on this journey and to be part of that team. The next co-leaders of our party will be debating the future of Scotland in televised debates with parties of the far right. As the only remaining woman leader of a Scottish political party, I want to be on that platform, taking on the anti-immigrant, anti-trans, and climate denial, and supporting the Scottish Greens to win our largest ever group of MSPs.
Thank you, Lorna. So we're going to move on to the questions part of tonight. We do have a lot. We have a minute allocated for the answer to each question, and I'll do it in reverse order from the opening speeches, if that's okay. And the first question this evening is, how will you lead our party to reach out to a broader electorate to persuade people who have never voted for us before to vote for us in the 2026 Holyrood election? So over to you, Lorna. You have a minute.
Thank you very much, Laura. We've done really well with our selection of candidates for the Holyrood election in terms of increasing the diversity. I'm really proud of us as a party and for all those candidates who stood forward. That's great. When I came into being an MSP, when I stood to be a candidate, I was coming from a relatively different background. I'm an electromechanical engineer, and that means I've worked for small high-tech companies. I've got an understanding of the needs of business and supply chains. That means that I can counter the narrative that Greens are anti-business. One of the directions that we need to stretch out to is people who work in renewables, people who understand that just transition moving forward will require businesses. We are pro-business, pro-businesses who pay living wages, who pay their taxes, who contribute to their local community, who take responsibility to the planet and to the future seriously. It's only the extractive, tax dodging, worker exploiting business we've got a problem. So that unique background of understanding the ethical side of business and that business transition is something that I can bring. It means I can speak to different audiences. That's only one direction, of course. And as I say, it's great that we have so many diverse candidates to help push the party in different directions.
Thanks, Lorna. And Ross, the same question to you, please.
Thanks very much. In the first instance, I think we need to actually agree a political strategy for the party. Who are we trying to reach and with what message? It is a problem that we don't have one at the moment. What I think we need is simple, clear, and repeated messages about what we've already achieved for people and what we'll do next. We know that the ceiling on our vote is a lot higher than the number of people who actually vote for us. And it's very often because people agree with us, but don't think voting Green will result in green change actually happening because they don't know what we've already delivered. So we do need to just keep talking about our existing achievements, things like free bus travel for young people, removing peak fares on the railways, and then what we'll do next. I think we have a specific issue as a party that is frankly far too white, and we need to reach out to minority communities. So I'm co-hosting a Diwali event in Parliament later this year. I've got a long history of working with the Kurdish community, and I'm really glad that we have quite a few Kurdish members in the party now as a result. And I think that in particular, our work in solidarity with the people of Palestine is because of the moral righteousness of that cause. But it's also an opportunity for us to build relationships with the Muslim, Arab, and South Asian communities in Scotland. That's something that we've been really poor
Ross,
on in
I'm
the
going to
past
have
and we
to
should do more of.
stop you there. Sorry, subject close to my heart, but you are a little bit over time. Okay, Gillian, over to you.
Grand, thanks, Laura. As well as being painfully white, we're painfully middle class as well, and often very jargonistic when we talk. A lot of those people that we need to reach out further to are those who have not been particularly, potentially not been particularly politically engaged previously. When I was at school, I had no political education. My political education was done as an intern with Patrick and Alison after 2014. We need to reach out to those folk that I went to school with, and I'm sure many other people on the call did as well. Talk to those communities, hear what it is that they need from us, and go from there. There's a lot of those local campaigns that we've run as MSPs. One of them that I know has broadened our appeal is the campaign we ran on school buses in North Lanarkshire. People who would probably never have given us a second look before now know that power of that organising capacity on the ground and being able to speak plainly to these families and how we support them. We need to do more of that across the party, and I think a political strategy for us is a huge part of that.
Thanks, Gillian. And Dominic.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'm tempted to say recruit Tories. And I'm only partly kidding there because my experience in the Tweeddale West campaign for the council was I more than trebled the vote from about 5 to 16.4%. And that was partly just actually by showing up on people's doorsteps and talking about what they care about and talking about also what we care about. And I think just having credible candidates who are prepared to actually do the work and are supported to do the work is a really important thing. Um, there's a lot of incipient vote that we don't reach because we're outside of target wards. If you're in a target ward and you're working it, I mean, I think there've been something like 18 items of literature delivered in Tweeddale West within a period of 2 years. You hammer the ward, and you find that you can grow the vote just by actually convincing people that the Greens are even here. Um, so that takes obviously targeting. It takes cash potentially. Okay, one last thing. No, okay, I won't take extra time. There you go.
Thanks, Dominic. Very much appreciated. Okay, the next question was staying on an electoral theme, and I've combined two questions together because one question is hopefully going to be quite a quick answer. So the question is, what are the party's main electoral threats and weaknesses, and what do you think we should do about them? And the follow-up to that is, if you had a vote in the Green Party of England and Wales leadership election, who would you vote for and why? And we will start with Gillian this time.
Thanks. I'll take the second bit first and say Zach. Uh, if I had a vote. The the first part on what our electoral threats are, obviously, what I said earlier around speaking plainly to voters and cutting out some of that jargon and really, really selling to them what it is we are as a party. I think not doing that is a real threat to us. I think the rise of reform is also a potential thing that could cost us votes in certain places. And while their policies are abhorrent, that ability to speak to people on a very simplistic basis is something that has garnered them support. So we need to do the same, but from that left angle.
Thanks, Gillian. And Ross next.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, this one's a little bit awkward because so Zach and I are friends and have been keeping in touch throughout our respective campaigns. We did kind of agree not to go and do direct cross endorsements because we didn't want it to look like either party was trying to influence the other's results, given issues with the parties' relationships recently. But yeah, in the spirit of honesty and transparency, yes, I would absolutely vote for Zach. I think his vision and his strategy very much align with what I'm putting forward here. I think in terms of our threats, one of our and weaknesses, one of our biggest weaknesses is that we talk about far too many things. We're far too complicated in the way we talk about them. And we move on really quickly after we've delivered a policy, so no one knows it was us. So the solution here is simple. We need a really clear political strategy, which sees us talk about the same handful of achievements and proposals over and over and over again for the next 8 or 9 months. Co-leaders have responsibility for political leadership, and party council is responsible for agreeing a strategy. So if I'm elected, I'll bring that strategy paper to council for everyone to agree, disagree, amend it. But regardless, what we need is a clear strategy focusing on a handful of issues that combine climate and social justice.
Thanks, Ross. And Lorna.
Thank you, Laura. My vision here is not too different from what's been expressed already. I think one of our weaknesses is we can sometimes misunderstand our voters. And as activist members of the party, we have key issues that are important to us that aren't necessarily those that resonate with wider voters. So this is where data comes into it. And as both Ross and Gillian have outlined, that messaging that voters can hear. And some of that is about choosing language carefully. Some of that is about repetition rather than going down the rabbit hole of key policy that we ourselves love but aren't necessarily connecting. Our voters are people that we need to get to know rather than people we should be imposing our votes upon. So using that data wisely and setting up our comm strategy is going to be absolute key to managing that and to overcoming that. Also using that data, understanding that where our votes come with relation to other parties, the SNP on the list, historically not Labour as much. However, we might wish that was true.
Thank you, Lorna. And Dominic. Oh, Dominic, you're on mute.
So I
Had to
was.
happen. It
So I
had to
was.
happen.
Yeah. Okay, to add to those, money or lack of it in our case, and obscene and cynical corporate billionaire funding in the case of some other parties. So raising money by, inspiring confidence, asking for what we really want for, ambitious asks for specific outcomes. Um, I guess clearly the far right is a threat, and we should be working together with other progressive forces in Scotland to see off that threat rather than choosing to sort of score points or undermine each other. I mean, I think another thing that we can do, which I wanted to mention in my previous answer, is actually use humor. I do like a good headline. Um, One of my favorites recently was our front page beavers with benefits. I thought that went down quite well. I had peals of laughter as I walked away from various voters' doors with that one. And I mean, it's a bit tabloid, but I also quite like quarry plan is full of holes. So just like being a little bit playful with stuff, I think goes quite a long way sometimes.
Thanks, Dominic. Okay. Moving on, we're staying in the same sort of area, but this next question, my 9-year-old daughter was delighted to hear there was a question on this theme. So, in the movie K-pop Demon Hunters, the character Rumi talks to a demon about hope, and she says, "That's the funny thing about hope. Nobody else gets to decide if you feel it. That choice belongs to you." What do the candidates feel about hope and its role in the future of the Green Party? And is there a place for it in our policy and politics? So, Ross first this time.
Thanks. And yeah, I think this is the kind of question that you just wouldn't get at any other party's hustings. I always come back to that quote about to be truly radical is to make hope possible rather than despair convincing. Despair doesn't motivate people, it totally demobilizes them. Hope is a prerequisite to mobilizing people to transform society. And we, of all people, know that absolutely radical transformation is required. But hope has been drained from Scottish politics over the last decade by those forces who don't want that transformational change. I think only the Greens can bring it back. Hope alone isn't enough, though. People need to see and feel results, which is why we need to focus on delivering change, not just on painting a positive picture of what could be if only if everybody agreed with us. So it's about really tangible policies that combine climate and social justice. It's why I think universal free bus travel needs to be one of our key policies going into the next election. Half of Scotland can already travel on the bus for free. We were the ones who delivered it to young people. Countries like Malta and Luxembourg already have it universally free. That's the kind of policy people understand. It helps them save money in their day-to-day lives and it tackles the climate emergency. That's how we bring hope back. What we've already delivered, where we'll go next.
Thanks, Ross. And Lorna next on hope.
Thank you, Laura. One of my favorite ways to close speeches is with the line, "The future can be brilliant. We just have to decide to make it so." Just about all the other political parties, and I think every single other political party has a vision for managed decline. Their message is the future is cut, the future will be worse. The climate crisis is something we can't do anything about. It's always a sort of helplessness. Oh, the rich must continue to get richer because that's the only way our economy works, apparently. The difference with the Scottish Greens is that we do have a message of hope. And what's interesting to me is how that can be cumulative. Ross has already mentioned our free bus travel, but within Scotland, the cumulative effect of the differences between Scottish politics and English politics are becoming really clear. Everything from baby boxes to the free bus travel to more kids getting free school meals, the Scottish child payment, free social care, free prescriptions, that is accumulating. The benefits of living in a state with a more compassionate system is coming up. And I forgot to say Zach in the last one.
Thank you. Dominic next on hope. Oh, you're on mute still.
Too many things, sorry. My first reaction was, what the hell? It's some kind of Black Ops ambush to get me to spend all day on Netflix. So yeah, I've just finished Demon Hunters and a couple of series of Borgen. But um, you can't tell people how to feel. You can lead them into an experience through carefully holding a space and sharing something new, but you don't own other people's experience or subjectivity. So I agree with that quote. But hope has to be based on substance and it has to be believable. And in my previous career, it was mostly project management, and there's some golden rules. You assess the risks, you decide how to control them, you review them regularly, you estimate the size and timescale for tasks in a systematic way, and ideally you build teams that are collaborative, can respond to change. But woe betide the project manager who commits to a so-called happy path plan based on naively optimistic predictions, and then everyone enters a world of pain. So my issue with some of our party slogans, such as a fairer, greener Scotland, they sound a bit like that happy path. But if they're not pointing at the risks we face, the scale of the task and our time and resources, what do we predict will really happen? And given that prediction, what might we start doing differently? And that's why I'm saying let's acknowledge politicians are far from being in control. Grassroots action must also be brought to bear. And that's why I'm calling on us all to protect what we love. By the way, I watched the movie trailer and its final words were, "Everything is at stake."
Thank you, Dominic. And Gillian.
I'm really glad the quote Ross used wasn't Star Wars because all I had in my head was rebellions are built on hope. And to be honest, every single policy thing that we bring forward, whether that's from manifestos that have been passed at conference or whether it's from constituents, grassroots organisations, whatever it is, there is a hope that change will happen behind every one of those asks. Without hope, we're absolutely nowhere in politics. So it has to be part of what we do. We hope that we're going to make change with everything that we do. And if we lose that, where do we go? What do we do? And how do we exist as a party trying to make change? So I think hope has to be a core part of what we do alongside that action to deliver it, as other people have said. But in a world where we've got so much rhetoric and so much hate around, I hope that something has to be different, that something can change, and that we can do that as a party and as individuals, I think has to be at the heart of what we do overall.
Thank you, Gillian. That's left me feeling quite hopeful. So that's nice. Okay, next question. The person who submitted the question says, I want to elect two co-leaders working harmoniously together, not two individual leaders in rivalry and fighting for attention. How will you approach the specific task of co-leadership and ensure that one leader is not dominating decision-making and grabbing all the media coverage for themselves? And I think it's to try to work through what Ross. Ross to go first is no. You went last, Gillian, so it should be Lorna to go first this time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm reassured by the panel here of candidates that I'm 100% sure that I would have no trouble working harmoniously with any of the people on the panel. It's one of those great privileges to get to work with someone as part of a team. It's been wonderful working with Patrick for the last 6 years, and I'm very happy to work with any of the people on the panel here. I know that will work really well. In terms of the debates and stuff, we have a very professional comms team. We always manage to take turns between the co-leaders in a fair and equitable way. To be fair, there is going to be a bit of a challenge upcoming. Is that now that we're the only party with a woman leader? No other political party has that. Where there is going to be the risk of manels at the debates, which we're going to have to manage. That may be something we end up having to participate in just because the numbers don't work. But obviously, I'm asking for your first preference vote, and one of the things I want to do is make sure we're breaking up those manels so that there is a woman leader on the stage there.
Thanks, Lorna. And Dominic next.
And remember to unmute. So I think we should play to our natural strength while also allowing each other the space and opportunity to grow into the role. So yeah, that involves sharing. And I have to say, it's been impressive to see how Patrick and Lorna have shared, and that doesn't happen by accident. But that said, if I'm elected co-leader, I won't in the foreseeable future also be an MSP. So that opens up potential for quite distinct roles. And as you know, I'm proposing a grassroots mobilization and support role. So I propose to tour the country, engage with our councillors and MSPs and their constituents, and conveying the message that our predicament is bigger than conventional politics can solve on its own, that communities need to reinvent local solidarity and resilience. So I won't be worried about my co-leader hogging the media because I'll be quite glad of a night off.
Thanks, Dominic. Gillian.
Thanks, Laura. I would be quite glad if the other co-leader took some of the work for a wee while. For anybody on the call who doesn't know, I had a small person 5 and a bit weeks ago, so I will be on maternity leave until January. And to be very clear to the party, I will not pick the party over that small person that's up the stairs. So I will need that support from whoever is that other co-leader to make sure that I am there and home for him. And that's where I think sometimes we are going to have to participate in a manel, because it is not progressive to force that tokenism of having a woman there and it being detrimental to them, whether that be for their health, whether that be to family, whether that be to caring responsibilities or whatever else. And that's something that we as a party need to be comfortable with and not tear strips off each other about if that's what happens, because there is very often a good reason behind it.
Thanks, Gillian. And Ross.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I should start by saying I really like everybody on this call and believe that I could work with them all. And I hope Dominic doesn't take this personally. He's the only candidate that I wouldn't work with because I don't think it should be two men. So if that was the result and I'd come second, I just wouldn't take up the role because, the law is getting in the way of our intended outcome here around gender balancing. But I believe in that outcome. In terms of co-working, though, our constitution does actually require, whether it's co-leaders, co-chairs, co-conveners of committees, etc., to publish joint working statements after they've all been elected. And we've kind of forgotten that. We've not really done that for a couple of years. So one of my first priorities, if I got elected with someone else, would be to come together and publish that joint working statement about how we were going to divide those responsibilities. I'd do that before conference. I have the opportunity to work with Gillian and Lorna all the time, and I'd be looking forward to doing that as co-leader. One thing I'm really keen to do is go out and knock on doors with branches. So I'm quite happy to do less media coverage, for example, if the other co-leader was more keen on that and less able to travel around the country and do that kind of branch building and support activity.
Thanks, Ross. Okay, we've had a good few questions in on policy delivery. So the next couple of questions are going to be in that area. And the first question is, how do you think the Scottish Green MSPs can have the biggest impact at Holyrood? Is it better to stand their ground loudly and proudly on policy issues, or compromise to create more common ground with the new Scottish Government? And it's Dominic to go first.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think doubling or trebling our number of MSPs is how we can have the biggest impact. And that's where our focus needs to be for the next 9 months. Each MSP brings staff, income, and increased influence. And then how we negotiate on cooperation agreements or budgets, I think, can be deferred. This 9 months is about loud and proud policy promotion so that voters know what we stand for. But we do need to stand our ground loudly and proudly. Otherwise, we end up just following someone else's political agenda. And we need to change the narrative and the culture in Scottish politics completely, not to try to fit ourselves into what's already here. We need to, well, you've heard me ad nauseum saying that we need a drastic change now, and that's not going to be achieved just by falling in with other people's agendas.
Thank you. And Gillian next.
Thanks, Laura. I'm going to give that politician answer of actually it's a bit of both sometimes. There are plenty of times where we've absolutely stood our ground on policy issues, and as normally our business manager, I can tell you there's been some fraught things at various points where we have stood our ground with government and a whole load of others, and we've had some angry phone calls at various points. But also some of our biggest wins this session have come from working with others. There are points where I have spoken to various parties about my safe access zones bill, for example. I know there's things that Ross has gone back and forward with other folk on, but you need to know where your limit is on that. And I think that's the important thing that we have to hold on to is where our limit is. And make sure that we keep to that and keep true to us. There is that collaborative thing that we need to do to not let perfect get in the way of progress. Because a step towards something and a step towards a green policy is better than taking the high ground and saying, nope, we're not going to vote for it until it's perfect and actually not get anywhere at all.
Thank you, Gillian. Ross.
Thanks. I mean, if we're not compromising and waiting for a Green majority government to deliver our vision, let's be honest, we could be waiting a while. The need for change is way too urgent for that. I think people want politicians and political parties who can cooperate where that's possible whilst holding on to their principles. And that's something that Greens do really well. There are some issues that we just can't compromise on. I wouldn't want us to, where we need to provide that moral leadership and not join the kind of cozy consensus. So trans rights is an obvious example of that. There cannot be compromise on human rights, and that's what trans rights are, human rights. But never compromising won't save any species, it won't reduce emissions, it won't feed hungry children. Our budget negotiations are a good example of that. This month, thousands of children across Scotland will start to get free school meals because the Greens negotiated for that to be part of the budget. I think we have a moral obligation to deliver as much change as we possibly can, as quickly as we possibly can, because people and the planet really need that. That's the kind of party I want us to be, one that's capable of cooperation and building common ground, but knows where our moral values are.
Thanks, Ross. And Lorna.
Another voice here for getting stuff done. That's how we make the biggest impact. Policies are not just for talking about. A manifesto isn't just a book of nice ideas. It's a to-do list. It's stuff that we actually need to make progress on and get done. And, Ross and Gillian have outlined that really well. The stuff we've already done in this term of Parliament and previous ones, are adding up cumulatively. They are making life better for people in Scotland because Greens have been in Parliament and in government. And that's our track record in councils and in the Scottish Parliament. People know that the Greens get stuff done. That's what we're there to do, and that's what I would continue to do.
Thank you, Lorna. And Dominic, I've already asked you this one, haven't I? Thank you. Phew. Just checking. Okay. Next question. What are the top 3 policies you want to campaign on for next year? And again, totally losing track. Is it Gillian first this time? Or am I about to? Yes. Phew, thank you.
Yeah, just a small one for me to go first on.
Just you.
Yeah. Uh, I think as a party, we need to look at how we approach green industrial strategy as a whole. Having grown up in Grangemouth and seen the refinery close in the last year, that was the first test of a just transition, and it hasn't worked for the community. And we really, really need to work on that to make sure that there's not another community that loses out, and actually to make sure that industry comes back into Grangemouth. So that's one. Being our health spokesperson, I think NHS reform is a huge part of what we need to be looking at. Now, that's a mammoth task, and we've been talking about it for so long. There's little bits that I think we need to get into and have a look at. And nature and biodiversity crisis and the number of species that we're losing and how climate is impacting those, I think is a huge thing as well. An odd one for a Central Belt MSP to say, but I think it really does appeal to rural communities and things as well, and to actually Scottish people in general, because we do like a wee jaunt up into rural areas and things and being able to see what we can see. So those would be a very whistle stop tour of the 3 I would start with.
Great. Thanks, Gillian. Ross.
Thanks. Yeah, I've said before, I think we need to combine climate justice and social justice. I like that Chico Mendes quote about environmentalism without class struggle being just gardening. So top of my list would be universal free bus travel. Like I've said before, countries like Malta and Luxembourg have it, and half of Scotland already has it. We know that transport is the one area where emissions are actually still rising, a catastrophic failure of Scottish climate policy. So universal free bus travel is key to that and tackling the cost of living crisis. I think we then need to go from the nature restoration fund that we set up into a much broader nature rescue plan. So I want to see huge investment in things like restoring our Atlantic rainforest, protecting and reintroducing native species. And all of that is about creating lots of jobs in rural areas. Across my region, I've seen the benefits of that. Places like Arran that benefited massively from the Nature Restoration Fund. And to pay for that, my third policy is that we need to tax the super rich. We need to pay those who've caused this crisis. We need to tax those who've caused this crisis, rather, to pay for the transformation that our society needs. So that's things like ending the tax breaks that shooting estates get, delivering a mansion tax, finally fixing the council tax so that those in literal mansions also pay their fair share to local government as well.
Thank you. Lorna.
There are so many important issues: Palestine, trans rights, local authority powers and funding, mental health, inequality, fair work. Of course, the manifesto will cover all of these, and our work, both in Parliament and councils, covers all of these. So they'll all be part of the campaign, and we'll make commitments on all those things. What we need to work out as a party is, what is our elevator pitch? So when you say to someone next year, why are you voting Green? They know exactly what that is. And I think that elevator pitch needs to be cost of living. That's what's on everybody's mind. And tackling the climate crisis, because we know as Greens, that is the number one most important thing bearing down on us. And we do that by taxing the rich. So I think those need to be our top 3 things on our elevator pitch. And they are not unrelated, of course, because many of the things that we need to do to tackle the climate crisis will also improve our cost of living. Things like insulating homes, upgrading our heating systems to heat networks so that that heat is made communal rather than individual. All these steps go toward tackling cost, climate, and we pay for it by taxing the rich. It's an easy message to get over, and it's core to us.
Thank you, Lorna. And Dominic.
Yeah, I mean, Ross stole my top one, which was the public transport, but hey, it was his to begin with. So I think that maybe what I'd add is that there's some stuff going on with land grabbing. So, and I think this is where potentially reform have got a bit of an in. So many big policies like forestry for carbon capture or even rewilding or nature restoration are getting co-opted by corporate money. and they're becoming basically dumping grounds for other people's climate guilt. George Monbiot has an interesting phrase called ghost acres. Like when you're doing some farming or sort of land-based activity over here to produce something, what are the ghost acres? What's happening in another part of the world that is actually part of that same activity? So I would focus. I'm only going to give you this one, in fact. I'd focus on looking much more carefully at the consequences of poorly thought through urgent targets and what civil servants might do with that and how they might just cave into more of the same corporate control.
Thank you, Dominic. Okay, and another question staying roughly in the policy space. What actions will you take to ensure that neurodivergent and otherwise disabled people in Scotland are protected and supported at a time when we are under attack from the government at Westminster? So starting with Ross this time.
Thanks very much. I'm glad this one's been asked. The first thing is we should be enshrining the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled People into law, like we've done with the UN Convention on the Rights of Children, because we can make all sorts of promises, all sorts of policies can be put in place, but if there's not that legal underpinning in terms of the rights of disabled people, then there's no opportunity for redress when all the great policies are not actually delivered on. And for a long time in Scotland, a lot of policies have been put in place but not actually delivered, and there's not been that route of redress. The part of this that I know the most about that I'll focus on is in relation to disabled children, young people, and neurodiverse children, young people. So I want to totally rewrite the criteria for children to get a coordinated support plan in school. Less than half of 1% of all children in Scotland with additional support needs actually have the only kind of plan that would give them that route to legal redress if they don't get the support they deserve. We need to massively expand that. We need a qualified and registered profession of assistance for those children because it's often the least qualified and lowest paid members of staff in school who are supporting them. And we need to make additional support needs teaching a promoted post so we can get far more teachers into that specialism.
Thank you. Lorna.
I'm really grateful for this question. The cuts that disabled and unwell people were facing under the Labour government only a couple of months ago are sort of horrendous to contemplate. And while those may have been partially mitigated, I think they're still coming down the track toward us. The reality is that the Scottish government can only do so much to mitigate that. We live on pocket money in Scotland that Westminster, hands to us. So as opposition MSPs, when negotiating the budget, we can talk about how much the Scottish government can and does do to mitigate the cuts that are coming our way from Westminster. But there is a real limit to what's possible there. So in the bigger picture, in the long run, the answers are Scottish independence, so we can develop our own tax system. But in the meantime, it is dismantling the conditions that are leading to neurodivergent and otherwise disabled people feeling isolated, being isolated, putting in place those practical steps to make sure that everybody, but especially neurodivergent and otherwise disabled people, have access to to good public services, good health, and that community that everybody needs.
Thank you, Lorna. And Dominic.
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of those questions where I'm inclined to say, gosh, I'm in awe of the answers that have come before. But what I was going to say was my first point of call is to engage directly with you to better understand your situation. And I can imagine that a lot of this is to do with protecting or finding the budget that we're going to lose in Holyrood as a result of those Westminster cuts. Um, we should also be applying maximum political pressure on Labour, particularly in Holyrood, in order to try to persuade them or force them to back away from those punishing cuts. Um, one just on Labour, one interesting thing, they campaigned on change. They campaigned on a one-word slogan too. If we're in any danger of campaigning on a one-word slogan, that's just a bit of a cautionary tale, right? Because there needs to be substance behind that slogan, otherwise it comes back to bite you.
Thank you. And Gillian.
Thanks, Laura. I'm probably gonna dovetail Ross a bit here and take what I would do for neurodivergent adults actually. We've seen a lot of those pathways for people seeking diagnosis collapse across various health boards across the country, and actually many of them are just not suitable for what people need. People are often waiting on psychiatry waiting lists, which many I'm sure neurodivergent people as well, psychiatrists themselves, believe is not the appropriate place for folk to be. We need to engage with those who are currently on waiting lists, but also those who have been through that system already to get a diagnosis in various health boards around the country to see how the different health boards are doing it. Take those good bits and make that a national service to make sure that people can get that diagnosis they need. There's been a lot coming out of Scottish Government about the fact that um, people should just be being supported in work or whatever it is with the adaptations that they need. But that presupposes everybody's got a good boss. And that they have that ability to have that support and actually underestimates the validation that a diagnosis actually gives people as well. So I think that's certainly something that I would like to work on once I'm back in January, but something I think the party should be looking at going forward too.
Thanks, Julian. Okay, we're going to move on to some questions around internal party and our culture. We got a few of these, so again, I've sort of merged a couple together. So the first question is, can you demonstrate how you have helped improve the party's culture while in a position of power? And how would you foster a more inclusive, respectful, and unified party given differing views? And also, what will you do to help improve the culture in the party so we're just kinder to each other? So let's Lorna first.
Thank you very much. I want to bring up the one on differing views first off, because I was asked this question by email by a journalist this week, and it was, what will you do to bring unity to the party when there's divergent views on trans rights? And I sort of went, if my views are divisive on trans rights, so be it. I'm not interested in compromising on those on human rights. So there are some points of principle on which we may not be unified. My views on trans rights are what they are. Trans rights are human rights. In terms of actions to make sure that the party is that sort of functional, accountable, safe space that we need it to be, the biggest piece of work that I do, and I know all the MSPs do, and the councillors and elected reps do, is make ourselves present and accountable. Attending, we come to council, we come to executive, we come to branch meetings, we hold special sessions, all of which are designed for members to ask us questions about what we're doing so that we can be transparent about why we make the decisions we do, what we're getting up to in Parliament. And that's such an important role. And it's something I would like to invite all members to participate in. We're there for you to ask questions of, like tonight, but at all these regular party meetings. Please come along and ask us those questions, because we would genuinely like to engage in that dialogue with you.
Thank you, Lorna. And Dominic.
Yeah, lots of questions. I mean, I think my colleagues in the borders probably see me as a collaborative and team player rather than a diva. So I hope that's I suppose the point is I don't have position of power other than sort of being a local activist. But for example, I've certainly done my best to share media opportunities that have come my way, which they do. So certainly passing TV interviews across to a Dumfries and Galloway member rather than just the easy route of accepting that myself. And I think I've been trying to share those things out in order to build the strength of the party in South Scotland, or to do my bit for that. With regards to inclusive and respectful, unified party, I'm not sure we're as disunified as the media loves to portray. So that's another thing. But I'm not because for example, I barely know the three members, the three other candidates here. I've met two of you, but so I'm not really in the center of finding out whether the alleged lack of unity. Um, but in regards to
Sorry,
improving
Dominic. I think you're beyond time just now,
okay,
so you might not
assume
see my hand.
assume good intentions, ask how people are.
Thanks, Dominic. Gillian.
I don't think we always need to be unified. I just think we have to be tolerant when our views differ. And that's something that we occasionally struggle with. Again, that progress being the enemy of perfect sometimes within the party, as well as what we demand of the MSPs at various points. We need to be nicer. The leaking out to the press has to stop. Like, that's people don't vote for what they perceive as divided parties. And that's what we need to sort overall. We need to come together and push towards 26 because we all want more MSPs elected, even if we disagree on the minutiae of some of the policies that we pass at conference. We want more green ideas represented in chambers, whether that be Holyrood, local authorities, beyond, hopefully, if we get back into Europe again. Um, and we need to bring that forward as a whole. On the first bit about me in positions of leadership, I still speak to the people I was Young Greens co-convener with and were on my council. So I hope I hope that counts for something. And yeah, often being the business manager within the group, I hope my colleagues don't hate me as well. So uh, that must count for something, I hope, Laura.
Thank you, Gillian. And Ross, finally.
Thanks. I mean, way too much to pack into 60 seconds, but I have written a couple of blogs about this because I really do care about the party's internal culture, and you can find them linked on my social media. I agree with Gillian that, if you're one of the two or three people who've been, for example, leaking confidential party documents to the Sun, sorry, you're not a Green and you should just leave. Party of 7,500 people. If you're one of the two or three who leaks and spreads dirt to the Murdoch press, then that's not Green politics. But I agree with Dominic that the civil war narrative, these headlines, are massively overblown, and we should have some perspective about that. But on a couple of points around culture, we need a far more forgiving culture, and we need to assume the best of each other, in particular of our workers, party workers, and our volunteer office bearers who have to do some pretty thankless tasks, and are very often have the worst assumed of them sometimes. I think part of this, though, is we actually need to spend less time talking to each other. We spend way too much time in internal party meetings. I think we're not a radical democracy at the moment. We're a radical bureaucracy masquerading as a radical democracy. And we have so many meetings that they're actually not very effective. We should spend less time talking to each other. The meetings should be more effective, and we should spend more time actually speaking to voters.
Thank you, Ross. Okay, and a nice simple question. How will you support local branches to get more Green councillors and MSPs elected? And we'll start with Dominic for this one.
Yeah, sorry, lost my notes. So I'll have to wing it. So I guess my vision for my co-leadership would be that I'd spend my time touring the country, and it would specifically be to help buoy up the grassroots. And that could include sort of town hall meetings, but also with the focus on climate adaptation. I think there's something in that. Um, Specifically, I think the other point actually is money. If we can raise more money, we can do more effective target to win campaigns. If you know, I spend my evenings and weekends delivering leaflets quite often, like thousands of the blasted things, and that's actually not the best use of my time. That could be paid for occasionally, so that we can have more of our people on canvassing. To do an effective target to win campaign, you need a lot of knocking on doors. You need a lot of thinking about local issues, drafting of good messages, and to be spending all of that time actually just stuffing things through the doors, not so great. Let's raise more money. Let's spend some of it on those regional and local campaigns.
Thanks, Dominic. Gillian.
So I think getting out there to branches and understanding what it is that's important to them is really important. Um, I think we often don't hear from some of the smaller branches because of capacity. I feel that, and I hope Falkirk members will agree with me on this, that we kind of feel for years that we've all been taking turns of being co-convener, and I'm sure we're not the only branch that's like that. So our branches are needing support. They're needing more members as well. So we're needing to do some things to recruit some members to some of those smaller branches and make some of those members that are maybe on the fringes of becoming active, able to step forward and do some of those things. And I think that leads to some of what Ross was saying about constant meetings. A lot of people don't see branch meetings and things like that as a part of the political activism they want to do. They want to be out knocking doors. Um, they want to be out helping folk, and some of those smaller branches often lose some of those active young people to our city branches when they go to university and things like that, or move for work. So some of that capacity building in some of the smaller branches, I think, is really important.
Thank you, Gillian. And Ross.
Thanks. First answer, canvas, canvas, canvas. I've campaigned from Shetland to Gatehouse of Fleet down at the borders. In 2017 and 22, I organised for our MSPs and parliamentary staff who wanted to campaign in our evenings for our council candidates who were within reach of the Parliament. That actually included Gillian in 2017. Me and Patrick went to knock on doors for her. And I'm not a crier, but I did cry in 2017 when Kim Long got elected, and again in 2022 when Kirsten Robb and Kayleigh O'Neill got elected because they were people that I knocked on doors for. I was in Kirkcudbright actually this past weekend campaigning for Laura, and I'm looking forward to crying when Laura gets elected as an MSP next May as well. So if I'm co-leader, I'll make myself available to branches. That's key. The other part of this is about political strategy. I think the party needs clear political leadership. It needs a strategy. Branches need to know what we're campaigning for and why, what kind of voters we're trying to reach, and it is the co-leaders who can put that strategy forward. So if elected, I will be producing, hopefully with the other co-leader, a draft political strategy to take to party council so we can all agree it, get behind it, and that's what we go out and campaign for. So we're saying the same things over and over again, and we're saying what voters actually need to hear from us.
Thanks, Ross. Lorna.
Thank you, Laura. Our staff and our volunteers at the moment are doing the impossible. We're an organization of nearly 8,000 people, and we have only a handful of members of staff. The Green Party of England and Wales have 75 members of staff, including 30, so 30, who do nothing but support branches with their campaigning. Now I'm not saying 75, but we definitely need to have that kind of staff support. We've reached the limit of what volunteers can do, and we're seeing that with the sort of burnout. We're asking too much of our volunteers. The kind of roles that our volunteers are undertaking in their time after work, around their caring responsibilities, around trying to look after their own health, are the kind of things that should be done by professionals. And to make that shift to that vision of the party, we need to change our fundraising substantially so that we can support a staff of between 10 and 15 staff members. That is what's going to make the difference to the branches, and that's what's going to move us from volunteer burnout to a professional party where the members are in charge of decision making and leadership, but the professional staff get the work done and support the branches.
Thanks, Lorna. Okay, next question is in relation to Scottish independence. Again, so subject we had a few submitted in, so I've amalgamated them a little bit. So the question is, how did you vote in the independence referendum? How much of a priority should it be now? And how would you campaign for Scottish independence if elected to the Scottish Parliament? And we will start with Gillian.
Thanks, Laura. Apologies if there's squeaks. I have a small person down the stairs with me now. Um, I voted I voted no in 2014, and I first said this publicly, I think on Politics Scotland earlier this year. I was terrified of saying that because of everything you get on social media about the fact that you're a traitor to the cause and all that sort of thing. But the last 10, nearly 11 years has only sought to sort of entrench in my mind that it's absolutely necessary, not just because of the ideological want of self-governance and all that sort of thing, and it being great for the next generations and all those sorts of things, but just because of some of the ridiculous roadblocks it puts in our way on a daily basis to achieve some of the things that Scottish Parliament agree we should be doing. Drugs policy, for example, we can't get rid of Westminster legislation that is holding us back from doing things that we would dearly love to do. Decriminalising drugs, drug testing. We have to ask Westminster if we want to do drug testing on a mass scale. It's ridiculous. And the amount of time, effort, and money that takes to go round the houses, and that's without mentioning things like what Wes Streeting's doing around trans healthcare and things as well, and the impact that has up here on medicines and stuff as well. Tiny, tiny fraction in one portfolio of the money, time, and effort we waste, let alone actually just being a self-governing country, which would be nice.
Thanks, Gillian. Ross next.
Thanks. So back in 2014, I was the communities coordinator for the Yes campaign. Really, really proud of the grassroots movement that we all built together back then, because it was a movement of hope. It was a movement that really believed that this could be a better and a fairer country. And I've said before, I want to bring that hope back. the mistake I think the independence movement's made over the last decade is just constantly talking about process. There's no cheat code. There's no one neat trick to securing independence that we just haven't figured out yet. We need to do the hard work of convincing a solid majority of people of this country to support putting Scotland's future in Scotland's hands. It's as simple as that. And it's been 50-50 for a long time. That's not enough. We need to connect independence with the issues that people are facing in their day-to-day lives right now. So under devolution, we can cut the cost of living by making bus travel free, by scrapping peak rail fares, for example. But we can't cut people's energy bills because that's reserved to Westminster, and they've tied the price of electricity to gas, despite the fact that electricity from renewables is so much cheaper. With independence in a renewables rich country like this, we could dramatically reduce people's energy bills. So that's how we connect independence as a kind of overarching issue with a lot of the day-to-day stuff that we're going to be campaigning on. And that's how we secure solid, sustained majority support for it.
Thank you. Lorna?
I remember traveling down from Orkney, where I was working on a wave energy machine in 2014, specifically to vote. And at that time, I was not the member of any political party. 2 weeks after the referendum, I paid my dues and joined the Scottish Greens because it felt like we'd lost an opportunity. And I didn't want to miss out when that opportunity came around again. When I was a minister in the Scottish government, less than 10 years after I joined, it's been a ride. Every single day I would be asking my civil servants, well, why can't we do this? Why can't we implement that policy? And every single day, that's not devolved, that's not devolved. And actually the situation is getting worse because of the Internal Market Act and because the government in Westminster has broken the Sewell Convention, which is the convention whereby they won't impose laws on Scotland in devolved areas. Actually, what Scotland has the power over has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And you will all know how my experience is with the bottle return scheme. That is a scheme that's a fully devolved power, fully within Scottish competence, that the UK government vetoed on a whim without showing any evidence, without any consultation, nothing at all. They can just do that. So Scotland's position is getting worse. We can't rejoin the EU without independence. There's so much that we can't do. And I think that actually needs to be part of all of our discussion. And those of you who watch us in the chamber will know that every time you join these things up, well, the reason we can't tax the rich properly in order to pay for the healthcare that disabled people need is because we don't have Scottish independence. All the Labour and Tories go, oh, and they roll their eyes as if this is somehow magically disconnected. But we need to keep with that message because these things are absolutely
linked. Lorna.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Dominic?
Yeah, so we don't just have a problem regarding independence, we have a problem regarding broken democracy, right? And the incredibly centralized democracy and non-proportional democracy. So I think maybe an interesting way to think about framing some of this, because Lorna's right, people are rolling their eyes about this, and it's not just the Tories. It's actually quite a lot of Green potential voters who also kind of don't want to hear about it. So I think I support Scottish independence, and I'm interested in how we should best weave that into our strategy. But I think an interesting thing to do would be to talk about all of the ways in which democracy in the UK is broken, including the chronic underfunding of local government, and indeed the highly centralized, inadequate structure of our local government, which is nothing like what's in other European countries where there's much more local control generally. And oh, by the way, I think it was a secret ballot, so I'm not going there.
Thank you, Dominic. Okay, I've got through the bulk of the questions that I'd highlighted from earlier and with amalgamation. So there's a couple that have come in tonight that I'd quite like to ask you. So the first one is, what are the candidates' view on the emerging new parties that target similar demographics that we do? How do we best navigate the challenge and ensure we continue to be positioned as the primary party that will deliver for this generation and generations to come? And we will start with Ross on that one.
Thanks. I mean, the short answer is if you're someone in Scotland who wants a part of the radical left that's committed to environmental, economic, and social justice, then we already exist. And without being presumptive or arrogant, we need to make that clear. One of the issues that the new party is staking a lot of its credibility on is opposing, quite rightly, the genocide in Palestine. Yesterday, I got the front page of the National with a letter to the First Minister outlining the ways that Scotland can, within devolved powers, implement the boycott, the policy of boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. So these are the kind of issues that we need to be hammering at, because they are the right thing to do. I want Scotland to boycott Israel because that is one of the steps that needs to be taken to end the genocide. But it is also how we demonstrate credibility, particularly to the kind of communities that this new party is obviously going to be primarily aiming its message at. We have a track record here. We need to talk more about it. We need to talk more about what we have already achieved that is already helping people in their day-to-day lives, like free bus travel for young people. But we also need to just get more effective and sharper with our messaging about what we do next, like my boycott, divestment, and sanctions policy using those existing devolved powers. Because it also puts pressure on the SNP, that one, to actually match their words with some actions, which is something they've not done up until now when it comes to Israel.
Thanks, Ross. Lorna.
Thank you very much. I mean, how many small parties have we seen or new parties have we seen come and go? There was Rise, everyone remember them? Tusk, Scottish Socialists are still around, but they've not got any MSPs. We've even had some parties on the right come and go. And the difference between them and the reason why I don't think at this point we need to fear them, I guess, or be worried about them is you guys. It's all of you. We have literally thousands of volunteers all over the country who are willing to knock on doors. We have counselors all over the country in their communities who are able to answer emails, go and see people, help them with the problems. We have a team of MSPs and staff. We've had MSPs in the Parliament from the very beginning. And just about every region of Scotland, someone can write into the Scottish Parliament and get an answer from a Green MSP and get that help. We are established because over decades, our volunteers, our staff, and our elected representatives have worked hard to make sure that's the case, to build that track record showing what we can do. Other parties can't come in and create that. You can't manufacture that. So we're in a good place to see them all.
Thanks, Lorna. Dominic.
So there's loads to agree with in what the others have said, so I'm not going to repeat it. But I'd slightly challenge the premise of the question about targeting a demographic, because we had a street stall in Peebles a couple of weeks ago, and like the people were in the pouring rain. It was ridiculous. An hour in the pouring rain. Thank goodness Barbara had laminated stuff, right? Handing out leaflets, and people would say no thanks, and they'd walk straight past, and then they turn around and they say no, it's because I already vote for you. I don't need your thing. And honest to God, some of those people looked like I would have assumed were Tories. And so you really can't tell. And so part of our job is not to target a demographic, it's to by having these honest conversations of the kind that I've been talking about, to broaden our appeal. I went down to London to the launch of SAFER, which was Strategic Adaptation for Emergency Resilience, which was launched by Caroline Lucas and Professor Rupert Reed. And their whole point is it's the thing of the climate majority project. Their whole point is most people are already scared about climate breakdown. We just need to make them more courageous to start talking about it in accessible ways by taking action locally.
Thank you, Dominic. And Gillian, with Helper.
With Helper. I don't know how much help he's going to be, Laura. As long as he's quiet, it's grand. Yes. Callan says hi, Gordon. Uh, uh, so I think the parties that are emerging don't have to get anybody elected to actually hurt us. We've seen this in the past with um, some of the ones that cost us Laura in South of Scotland the last time, and certainly cost us Kim in Glasgow as well. We need to show that actually their policies are nothing new. They're things we've been doing and been delivering on for years now. So actually people don't necessarily need that alternative. And I think we need to be looking at ourselves as to why we could potentially lose voters to some of these parties in the first place, whether that is mistaken identity, in the case of the one at the last election, or potentially people trying to paint themselves as something shiny and new, as we've seen with reform on the right. They're just a bunch of Tories in a different rosette. And people reinventing themselves is nothing new in politics. But I think we need to show that we've been here. We've been delivering on things for years. These are policies that we've spoken about. These are policies that we are enacting, and actually we are the safe bet for people's votes, and that involves getting out and speaking to them on the doorsteps.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question that came in the chat, so it's not in the Q&A, but I will pop it in the box, but it did come up in the chat earlier. and it concerns land ownership. So it's asking the candidates' views about the number of non-resident individuals, so those are the nationalities, owning so much of our land and property. And we will start with Lorna.
Thank you. This came up very much when we were in government, when the first parts of the land reform, the consultations for the land reform bill were being undertaken. And it comes up regularly in discussions around who we can tax and how much they can tax them. It is a perennial problem. Finding out who owns land is a big problem. Getting a properly complete land register for Scotland. Our register is incomplete, knowing who owns things. And when they are they owned through shell companies? There's a difference, of course, between an absentee landlord and a foreign landlord, and wading through all the property rights stuff around that is a big problem. But absolutely, absentee landlords who avoiding taxes, who are driving up the cost of land, who are using it for carbon credits, but not actually treating the land in a way that creates a healthy ecosystems and biodiversity. All of that is a major problem. And without effective land reform, it's difficult to see how to tackle those. The civil servants are very nervous about the legal implications of that. And it was actually myself and Marion McCallum pushing them harder on that. But it's very hard to get the Scottish government to take risks in that area. So it's something we need to keep working on.
Thank you. Dominic.
So it's not about nationalities. Immigrants are welcome in Scotland. Please come and join us, but don't buy up our land in vast blocks. And that goes for the investment companies too. So what do I think? I think it's appalling. And I think I hear what Lorna says, that land reform is hard. But my God, it's an important thing because it's becoming increasingly worse. And now supposed green priorities are turning into things that inflate land values and open the door to companies that then get funding from the Scottish National Investment Bank in order to buy land and do toxic commercial forestry. And I say that advisedly. Not all forms of commercial forestry are bad. Some of them are. The ones that happen without an environmental assessment and spray glyphosate from helicopters before they even have a license. The Scottish government is funding some of that directly through the Scottish National Investment Bank to investment funds, and then funding it again for the planting through Scottish forestry grants. And this is what I mean when there are big targets in the control of bureaucrats under extreme pressure. We need to give much more detailed consideration to the consequences of high-level policies.
Thank you. Gillian, if that's all right.
Sorry, trying to turn around a small person. So, what do we think about the number of individuals? Not great. It's fairly concentrated in very few hands. What we need to do about it is probably one of Ross's favourite topics in tax. Me loves a tax, does Ross. Making sure that we tax it properly and making sure that people can't hide it away, like Lorna said, in these shell companies in the Cayman Islands or wherever else, and you lose a trail somewhere of the companies. Some of them literally have companies and it's a number at the end as to this shell company that's above it. It's a bit ridiculous when you actually start looking into it. So making sure that we tax it properly, that we don't allow people to bank offshore. That would do wonders for a great many things, not just land reform. And yeah, dispersing that concentration of land, because I think that's one of the big things is that concentration of vast swathes of land in very few hands.
Thank you. And I get the impression Ross is itching to answer this question. So over to you, Ross.
Yeah, a topic that I have great enthusiasm for. So that the land reform bill is going through Parliament at the moment. I lodged a whole bunch of amendments to it. I'm not our land reform spokesperson, so it was just the tax side of it that I was dealing with. But I lodged amendments to do things like massively increase the tax that you would pay when you were buying a large estate, because that's what the bill concerns, large estates, but also to massively increase ongoing taxes, primarily so council tax for overseas owners, especially those from tax havens. And also talking to what Lorna mentioned, I tabled amendments, I forced votes on adding all land in Scotland to our valuation rule. But of course, the other parties all voted against that because they want to stand up for vested interests. So I did make some progress. So I have lifted the 200% cap on council tax, not just for overseas owners, but in general, the 200% cap on council tax, where it's a second home, a holiday home, a short-term let, etc. So councils are going to have the power to set whatever rate of council tax they want. I wanted an additional power for them to set a surcharge for overseas owners, but again, other parties didn't want that. And the last thing I'm still pushing for is to end the tax breaks that shooting estates get, because these tax breaks are often owned by overseas billionaires. Some of them are also owned by Tory MSPs, including the MSP who convenes the committee dealing with the land reform bill. Tax is a way to deal with this without getting to the heart of the issue, though. We should simply just ban ownership of land in Scotland from for those who are based in tax havens.
Okay, thank you, Ross. Slightly over time there. Okay, next question. If you can keep it as brief as possible, because I'd like to get to closing statements at around 10 to. But it's from our Scottish Young Greens co-convener, and she's asking how the candidates would support and encourage the activeness of young people in the party. So it's Dominic to answer this one first.
Wow. Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because yeah, I'm going to be speechless on this one. I'm actually meeting with a young volunteer, I think on Sunday morning. So I mean, I think just being up for sort of engaging and trying to find a way through to what people want, how they want to contribute, and being flexible in terms of their availability, and trying to make myself available uh, in order to engage. Um, I think, to be honest, I don't have a crafted answer for this one. I think there's a danger of people like me ending up incumbent in positions for 20 years and then there just being no room at the top. And I think, how does one deal with that? Because anyone like the other people on this panel who have invested their lives and into getting to where they are kind of don't really want early retirement. And so I think basically we just need to massively expand our voting appeal in order to make there be more room at the top, or I don't mean at the top, room across the board in all of the available elected roles.
Thanks, Dominic. Gillian.
I think one of the strongest things we can do is give young people that experience and take them with us. There's a great number of counsellors and things who gave me an awful lot of advice ahead of when I stood in 2017 for the council elections in Edinburgh, and that was absolutely invaluable and serves me to this day occasionally when I think back to some of the advice I was given at that point. And it's being able to give that time to those young people that I think is really important. Sounds so old. It's only 4 years since I was a young green, I promise. Um, but definitely giving them that experience and taking them with us. Many young people just want to be active, want to have their voices represented and want to have their issues represented too, which I think is really important and potentially is one of the things that concerns me about the PRD in itself as well, that it doesn't quite move quickly enough with differences in policy thoughts and things and how people live their lives and how that moves on. But highlighting those voices, making sure that they have time and space at conference and in some of those other venues, and making sure that us as elected reps give them space to be able to see that they could come and challenge us and be us one day too.
Great. Being quite generous with your time, Gillian. Just mindful you're multitasking. Okay, Ross.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, I'm conscious in answering this that I remember not that long ago, me and Gillian were the future once. We've both been conveners of the Young Greens. I have been there, done that with the whole youngest ever MSP thing, and I'm really proud of that. I think that the simplest answer here is to just take the time to encourage and support young members, not just encourage young party members to run, whether it is in internal elections or for MSP or councillor, but to support them when they do. Don't just encourage young people to put themselves forward and then leave them to it. Politics can be pretty rough. I I have to carry a panic alarm with me every time I leave the house. Ongoing, multiple ongoing police investigations. Like we can't pretend that it's easy enough just to encourage people to run and then they'll be fine. That ongoing support is absolutely essential while people are running for election and if they get elected as well. And to make sure that young members have that and that members from any marginalised background have that is essential. I'm really glad that some of the young people that I encouraged to run, that I took out for coffee to have a chat with and answer their questions, have put themselves forward and are either on our lists for the Holyrood election or standing for internal elections. Because sometimes just having that conversation, planting that seed is all it takes in the first instance. You just need to make sure that the ongoing support is there as well.
Thank you. And Lorna.
I'm always super impressed by our Scottish Young Greens, not only how active they are, how knowledgeable they are, and how many of them, like Ross and Gillian and so many others, then do go on to take on leadership roles within the party and elected representative roles. It's just brilliant. I am always in awe. It seems to me from a great distance, because it's been a long time since I was a young person, that there are two specific areas we could support in. One is specifically around policies that affect young people, making sure those get into our manifesto. So the manifesto development process is happening right now. So Scottish Young Greens, if you're not intimately involved in that process, please message me or Gillian or Ross after this meeting, and we will get you involved in that process because we need your voices there. And the other side is that support to participate in the party, given the challenges that young people have with their lives being much more dynamic than those of us who are older, and that sort of continuity. I know over the years, various Young Greens groups have fallen apart because they just didn't have that kind of continuity of institutional knowledge. So practical support to keep the Young Greens operational is something we can do as well.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to our closing statements because we're 8 minutes to 8. Gillian, I'm going to invite you to go first, and also so that hopefully it'll be easier for the multitasking. Then you know you're free. So you have 2 minutes for your closing statements. On you go.
Thanks, Laura. Firstly, thank you to you for chairing, and thank you to everybody who's put questions in today. I think it's been really broad and really, really robust in challenging us on various points from policy to internal culture, and back again. I'm asking for your first preference because I think it is time for that generational change in leadership of the party. That we're at a point now where we need to make sure that voices are diverse and that we need to hear that hope across Scottish politics. I hope this evening that I've been able to lay out some of the reasons why. I hope that some of you will be able to give me your first preference. I promise to always be at least a listening ear, even if I don't agree with you at various points. I promise that we will disagree robustly at various points, I'm sure, but that we'll always do that in a way that brings the party back together again to tackle the next issue. I think one of the things that's been highlighted this evening is that we do have to disagree. We're not a broad church, we're quite a narrow one. But we do need to make sure that progress is not the enemy of perfect. Get more MSPs, get more councillors, and work towards that Green majority government at some point. Hopefully not too many years down the line, despite Ross's scepticism.
Thank you, Gillian. And with time to spare. Okay, Ross next.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I'm asking members for your first preference votes because I believe this party can give people hope again, and we can transform Scotland. I believe that we need to transform Scotland given the scale of the crises that we face, the climate crisis and the inequality crisis. And I've got a track record of delivery on this. I have a track record of increasing taxes on the rich, of building community campaigns, of supporting families who are in poverty, of reaching out to new communities that the party hasn't connected with previously. And I've got a plan to get the party together behind a clear political strategy so that we know who we're speaking to and what about, and who we're against. Because effective campaigning is storytelling, and good stories need antagonists. And by God, does Scotland have antagonists? The super rich, greedy landlords, polluting companies. I've got a track record of taking them all on and winning. That debate I had with Piers Morgan will clearly outlive me. But more importantly than the kind of showpiece stuff like that, I've fought and I've won campaigns to protect people and planet from the rich and powerful. And I've got ideas for how to make this party more effective and an easier party to get involved in. Because I think we're at our best when we have mobilised the whole party, when we have all come together. to be a genuine radical democracy, we need to be a party that it is easy to get involved in. And we need to be unafraid of having good, robust debates about policy differences, about strategic differences, but for them to not be personal. Because our real opponents are not inside this party. Our real opponents, the really dangerous people, are on their way into the Scottish Parliament next year. And it is absolutely essential that we have as many Greens in there as possible to stand against that. And not just to stand against that and wave the flag for a more progressive Scotland, but to fight against them and to win. We need to focus on winning because we know how urgent that transformation is. We know that Scotland needs radical climate action now. We know that we need to lift people, especially children, out of poverty now. We as a party are capable of delivering that change. And I think we're at our best when we are focused on that delivery, when we're focused on what we can do to transform people's lives and protect this planet. I think as co-leader, I can make a contribution to that. So that's why I'm asking for your first preference vote when voting opens.
Thank you, Ross. Lorna.
It has been my privilege to represent the Scottish Greens in our Parliament since 2021. As one of the first Green ministers in the UK, I delivered a national upgrade to recycling infrastructure and the transformative Nature Restoration Fund. It was my work in government that ensured that every organisation in receipt of Scottish Government grants has to pay the living wage, which increased the wages of thousands of workers. My experience as a minister makes me especially effective because I know exactly how to press ministers on their decisions and to follow up when the government drops a commitment. In the next term of Parliament, I intend to press the Scottish Government to action on cost of living, housing, climate, and LGBT plus issues. I'll continue to work to reform council tax and give councils more powers, including those to raise funds. The Scottish Greens are in transition from being a small yet effective party to being a major force in Scottish politics. We can build on our successes and build the Scotland that we want to see. If members would like me to continue as part of the co-leader team, I would be very happy to serve. And I'll do my absolute best to represent you well and communicate your vision and values.
Thank you. And finally, Dominic.
So the Scottish Greens are a party of scientific and social realists, and on climate and nature, the public trust us more than others. So we must take the issue of hope very seriously. If we shy away from the truth, if the trusted Greens seem to imply that a brilliant future is just around the corner, we risk spreading dangerous hopium. The harsh realities I've spoken about are not my fantasies. They're evidenced by the IPCC, by insurers fleeing uninsurable risks, and by the quiet global corporate land grab to monopolize food and water as the crisis deepens. A fairer, greener Scotland is too bland. We must protect what we love by spelling out both the immediate and local threats and the long-term humanitarian disaster ahead, and by mobilizing communities to prepare and respond with compassion. This isn't under political control. Essentially, nobody is in charge. We can fight the super rich to limit the damage they cause, but we must also prepare. That might mean expanding local food reserves as a buffer against the global harvest failure, recruiting landowners to make space for water to avert floods, or collective action to retrofit homes against harsher winters if the Atlantic circulation begins to collapse. I want to spark those conversations and support action in any community willing to host me. And I know there are many other issues: poverty, prejudice, inequality, independence, health and care, mental health, and good people in our party work tirelessly on these causes. There's hope in that work, but let's be clear, it's the hope that we can remain human and kind in the grip of a catastrophe, not the hopium that markets and politicians have got it covered. We must be real with people who knows they might appreciate it. Let's prepare for the worst, strive for the best, and protect what we love.
Thank you, Dominic. Nice note to end on, and we are bang on 8 o'clock. So we will bring proceedings to the close this evening. Thank you to all our candidates for their time. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions in advance. I'm so sorry that we haven't been able to answer all of them, but the candidates will have them, and we'll have the opportunity to answer them if they would like in writing. But thank you everybody for coming, and for the team in the background helping us, and enjoy voting when voting opens. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, everyone.